Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah. I am the founder and executive director of Speak Your Truth Today, and we're super excited to be here to talk about survivor support groups and talk with our panelists who have utilized our support group at Speak Your Truth, our Facebook support group. And so thank you so much to Know More and this exciting week that we're kicking off. So hope that everyone checks in on all the different activities and webinars that Know More is offering this week and tunes into other webinars. So I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. So Lisa, go ahead and raise your hand. But Lisa is a volunteer admin at Speak Your Truth. She's been volunteering with us for over 3 years, I think, now. And she is a full-time wheelchair user since the age of 2 because of a spinal cord defect. And she's a huge advocate for accessibility and inclusivity for all survivors within the domestic violence space. Our next panelist is Tegan Mitchell. She's a member of Speak Your Truth, and she left her abusive ex-partner in the summer of 2021 and attributes a large part of her healing journey to Speak Your Truth support group that helped her find her voice. And our last panelist is Tom Gatchell. He's a member of Speak Your Truth, and his abusive ex-wife abandoned him and his children on New Year's Eve in 1999. He navigated single parenthood with no outside support and has found major healing through volunteering for hospice care patients for over 16 years. So I'm excited to dive in a little bit more to, into your guys' stories, and as well as learn more about how Speak Your Truth and support groups have impacted your guys' healing. So to really start off this discussion, I'd like to dive in a little bit more into, what Speak Your Truth is, and or our support group is, and how it's just a little bit different than in-person support groups. To get everyone up to speed, you might know, about our support group, or you might not, but we are a Facebook support group with over 18,000 survivors worldwide. And how we got started was actually, I shared my own story on Facebook. After I had left my abusive relationship, I was kind of in a really angry space of my healing journey, and feeling like no one understood what I was going through. And also my community didn't seem to be educated on the subject. It just felt like we weren't talking about domestic violence. And so I shared my own story, and to my surprise, the post went a little bit viral. And so I was receiving, hundreds of messages and thousands of comments from fellow survivors who really needed support. And I felt this immense responsibility to do something. So kind of on a whim, I made the Facebook support group, hoping that it could be a place that was empowering and healing for survivors, out of their healing journeys of abuse. And in 2 weeks, we had over 12,000 members. So it's really quite a shock there in the beginning. It was very evident to us that people really wanted to share their stories and be heard in a space that truly understood what they were going through. So we very quickly, set up a volunteer team and rules and rhythms for the group. And now it's turned into an incredibly empowering space, where survivors no longer feel alone in the struggles that they face. And we just surpassed our 4-year anniversary in February. So we are now an official 501c3 nonprofit, and are working towards expanding and reaching all survivors, and providing our resource. So we offered something that's just a little bit different than in-person support groups. Typically in-person support groups are led by shelters or nonprofits that aid domestic violence survivors, and they're typically held, once or twice a week for an hour or two, and you typically have to show up in person or on Zoom, and you're also usually surrounded by survivors in similar healing stages of their healing journey out of abuse. And so in-person support groups can be incredibly helpful, especially for those that really need that in-person human connection. I was a part of one for a while, and it really helped me find survivors in my local area to connect with. But Speak Your Truth, what Speak Your Truth offers is just a little bit different in our Facebook support group. And so to highlight those differences, we are technically available 24/7. You can really hop into the Facebook group at any moment in your day, and especially, I find it really helpful in those moments when you really need that support. And so you're able to hop in, read comments, read posts, or post yourself and seek that support. And we also have a couple cool features that make it a little bit different as well, like the anonymous posting feature. Our anonymous posting feature is a very key feature of our support group because it enables people to be completely anonymous within the support group. And it's an important accessibility piece that I like to touch on, because oftentimes organizations that aid survivors can't help until after the survivor has chosen to leave. And we are able to really target survivors that are still in relationships, because we do have this feature, and they can be completely anonymous and seek support and education and resources even before they have left. So we can really target survivors in that area. We know, all of us know, that it takes so long to leave an abusive relationship, and so being able to provide support to those survivors is really important to us. And then another thing that makes us a little bit different is members of Speak Your Truth are really in all different stages of their healing journeys. We have some survivors that, like I mentioned, are still in these relationships, are still really in the thick of it, in healing afterwards as well, in custody battles, or healing after the couple years after they have left. And then we have survivors that have been out for 20 plus years, like Tom, and they're really able to give advice and encouragement and support to those that are earlier on in their healing journeys. And we found that it's really empowering for both the survivors. The ones that have been out for a long time are really able to give back to those in earlier stages, in their own shoes, just a couple of years, prior. And then for the ones that are still in the thick of it, get to be heard and understood by survivors that truly understand what they're going through because they've been through it themselves. So yes, we, in Speak Your Truth, we get to walk alongside survivors throughout their entire journeys out of abuse. And it's really turned into a beautifully empowering space. So that's kind of where our discussion is centered on today with Speak Your Truth. But I would love to shift the conversation now to highlight our panelists' stories and discuss how they have found healing in our community through our online support group. So Lisa, I would love to start with you. From knowing a little bit of your story, I know that the lack of accessible resources in your community was a major barrier in finding healing and support. So can you tell us a little bit more about these challenges and how you found Speak Your Truth?
Yeah, when I was attempting to leave my abuser, escape everything that was going on with him, I had already known that at the time, thankfully this has changed, but at the time, the domestic violence facility closest to me was not wheelchair accessible. They told me that they had accessible rooms, at the top of over 20 stairs with no elevator. So that left me feeling very stuck. My abuser had a really good knack of reinforcing the word burden into me. And I remember one particular conversation with him, and I had made my first disclosure seeking help from some people, and that didn't go well. And I came back to him, and he flat out told me, "Where do you think you're going to go? Do you know what a burden you're going to be if you try to go to your family, to your friends? You might as well just stay, because that's the only way you're never going to burden people," and things to that effect. And so I stayed for approximately another year and a half. Then by the time I left and had been out for a good little while, and things were fully coming to an end, I was working on getting under a roof of my own again and getting out from under the roof of the relative whose home that I fled to, and was just in a really, really, really bad headspace still. And it was one of those things that people didn't realize how low I'd gotten. I have heard so much victim blaming, and this is a common thing in the disability community, where people try to justify an abuser's actions based on our having a disability. That's crap. First of all, just tell you that disability does not cause abuse. Okay. So when Hannah's story came out, I saw it, I believe, the day that you popped it online, and it just really resonated with me and however many other people. And then I forget how long it was between the time you posted it to when you created the group, but I got in on day one, and I was terrified to post, to say anything. I was terrified to let anybody know that I was there. And it was a lot of anonymously posting through admins at the time, because we didn't have the anonymous posting feature at the very beginning. And it quickly became something that pulled me out of that hole. And it was a deep hole. And I honestly believe that had I not had that support, that validation, that being heard, had I not had the community that flat out told me, literally hundreds of people saying, "This is not your fault. The only one to blame is the abuser." Had I not had that right at that point in time, I probably would not be here. And I really think that that's a huge thing for so many people that come to us, to have that validation that what's going on with you is not your fault. So that's kind of what got me in, and then eventually I was recruited for the team. So
Yes. Yes. No, I love your story so much, because it's like when you joined, and you joined when so many others joined, right at that beginning, through the viral post, and it was like a outpouring of you know especially in that early stages, because there was so many people that joined at that time. It was very overwhelming, but for you to in the midst of all of that, recognize that, oh, I'm not alone in this. Like, I can, like, from your story, and knowing your story, the amount of isolation that you had been in the middle of, and then being able to turn online for support is really beautiful. And then in the midst of the pandemic as well, we were already up and running by the time that pandemic hit. And so it just it's anyways, I'm very thankful that you saw my post and were able to join, and that it was so impactful for you. But I would love to know a little bit more about your journey to becoming an admin, and how that was for you.
it was one of those things, again, in the beginning, I we didn't have the anonymous posting feature. So I was very slowly sending bits and pieces of my story to a particular admin and just being very, very quiet, not saying a whole lot, but then every once in a while, certain things would resonate with me and I would just get that little bit of bravery to come into the comment section. And then I got a little bit braver and a little bit feistier and just kind of felt a little bit more comfortable, got to know some of the people on the team. And it just kind of became more of a community sense. And I think it was 6 or 7 months in, roughly, correct me if I'm wrong, when one of the other admins approached me in Messenger saying, "Hey, we've been talking about you." And I'm like, uh-oh. Your mind goes straight to, I'm in trouble, crap. How about joining the team? Have you ever thought about coming on and helping us do what we do? And I'm, what? Me? Okay, let me think about that for a little bit. But it's a very slow process of learning and getting to know everybody. And you know this, Hannah, it's basically like a big family behind the scenes now. I mean, we all go, some of us go visit each other. We're constantly in communication, both personally and for group related things. And it's been a huge journey from being scared of having anyone know that I was even in there to now I'm a twice a week admin and doing things like this, and it's just, like I say, we've all been on this journey together and it's been quite the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. So healing too. I mean, I was in the middle of my own divorce, when everything happened. And so I account a huge part of my own healing to speak your truth because, all of a sudden I had all of these people that, were in the middle of it as well and healing together. And I just love how you joined as an admin because I know that, you were, like timid at first, and we're shared just a little bit here and there, but now to see you now and to see how confident you are now is just such a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for sharing, your journey and speak your truth. And thank you for, Lisa is our inclusion specialist on our team, volunteer inclusion specialist. So she makes sure that we as a team follow all procedures to make sure that the space is, safe and inclusive for all survivors to heal. And so anyways, she's been a really important part of our team. So thank you. And I think, the inclusion part of it all is a big reason why Tom's story is so important, I think, to share. So I would love to move over to Tom. We have included male survivors in our support group from the very beginning, and it. To be honest, it wasn't something that I knew was so important until I started learning stories like Tom. And so, I would love to learn more of your story, Tom, for you to share a little bit more of your story for everyone, and give us some background as to how you found Speak Your Truth as well. And that process for you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tom. Let's see. Well, it started, my wife, just one day she was gone. We just woke up and she had taken all her stuff the day before. We were at my grandmother's and she just left. And my kids were 8 and 3. And everybody, like, it was my fault. I blame myself, went through all the things that I could have said, done differently, but you finally realize there's nothing. It's not you, it's them. But your family looks at you different. Like, why don't you just give her a call? My grandmother would say, just apologize for whatever you did. But the problem is I didn't do anything. And now I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old daughter, and my son and my daughter that I have to raise, and there's nobody there. People literally ran from me. Friends, when you're in a, when you're married with kids, you're in couple groups. Everything you do is with couples. But then when you're a single, it's like you don't fit. When I would walk in the room, people literally, every guy literally goes to his wife or his girlfriend, like I'm their competition now. I'm not a friend anymore. I'm different. But no, I'm the same guy that we all hung out and do things with. It's just me. So I would take the kids and we would do everything together. I mean, concerts, I took them to Disney World, Groundhog Day, all the things we would do. And they still do these things to this day, a lot of them anyway. But there was no support groups. If I was an alcoholic, there's a place for that. If I was a drug addict, if I'm homeless, there's places. But I'm just a guy who has so much on his plate, and I have to work full time and raise these kids and live and raise them well, and not blame people. Just fight my way through it just to live, to have a normal day. And it took a long time before I realized that it wasn't me. It wasn't, because for a long time I thought it was. And one day I saw Hannah's post, I believe it was your birthday, maybe on a February day. And I could see and feel your pain that you were going through. And it was familiar. So I followed you to see how it ended, because I need to check and make sure that even though I didn't know you, I felt something for you, and I needed to see how it ended. And we can't always help people, but it's the little things we do that can. I mean, no matter what, I just had to see how your story ended. And I joined the group, and I was a little anxious because here again, I'm a guy and it's mostly women. And how is this going to go? Are they going to, welcome me? And I was shocked that I was so, I was one of them. We're all the same, and I can't imagine. I couldn't imagine this going any better than it did. And now I post things, and it's not that I'm a guy. They look at me like I'm a person. I'm one of them. I was hurt. I healed like they did, and I can root for them and help them, maybe in ways that nobody ever helped me.
No, I love it. I'm so glad that you stuck around to see how the story ended, and were able to, join the group. I remember there being a time, right at the beginning there, where we had so many survivors joining at once, where there was a fear, that, oh, is there men in this group as well? There was a fear there. And so there was a concern at the very beginning, like, oh, should we split into two groups, and keep the genders separate? But, there was an overwhelming response from multiple members that was like, no, we are all survivors, and when it comes to abuse, any gender can be a perpetrator or a survivor of abuse, and it's important to create spaces where all survivors can grow and heal and learn from each other, because we have learned so much from you, Tom, and your story, and had we lived into that fear, I don't know if we would have had the blessing of learning your story, and also amplifying it, because you're a perfect example as to why our group is so important, and can reach survivors in these completely different contexts, like Lisa and you, Tom, completely different stories, but both of you needed that support so much, and sometimes you just don't have it in your local area. And so, so anyways, I'm just so glad that you found us and joined us and have stuck around, because learning more of your story has been very impactful. And so I would love to know a little bit more about your journey in the support group. You've shared a little bit of your experience in the support group, but I'd love to know a little bit more about how you think, the group might have been helpful for you, right when you left, or right when, you were in the middle of your wife leaving and abandoning you and your kids. How would the support group, how do you see the support group being helpful for men like you, that have experienced abuse, and kind of the journey of coming out of that?
Well, I didn't learn this till a little bit later, about 5 years later, when I realized I wanted to volunteer. I picked hospice because I know they're alone, they have nobody. But the most important thing the website does is what is connections. They have no connections, and I had no connections. And when you don't feel connected to the world, it makes you feel more alone. You just have nobody. And the website, it's we all, sometimes we just want someone to sit and listen. Well, you got 18,000 people that'll sit and listen. And back then, oh God, that means more than anything. I had a patient, she was Alzheimer's, really, really bad. And this is when I first started out, how I learned about connections. And every time I would go, she couldn't speak, but she would sing, and none of it made any sense. It was all just gibberish, but she would sing really loud. And one day I wondered, why am I here? I'm doing nothing for her. She can't speak, she doesn't understand me. So after a few visits, we get to pick and choose who we want to visit. I was going to go to my boss and say, I'm not doing any good here with her. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And on that day when I was leaving, the nurse stopped me and she said, Mary loves you. And I said, how do you know? And she said, because it's the only time she ever sings. So the value of, we connected. And every time I would go back, I would sing with her now, because she was just so comfortable with me. But it's all about connections. To feel part of something bigger than, you're not alone. Everybody's with you. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, sometimes it takes a village to help somebody out of an abusive relationship, because you're not alone. Everybody's with you. We connect on the website through pain, but we also connect with hope and love, and we all want everybody to do better and to help them. And that's so much more than I ever thought it could be. But thank you for starting all of this.
Oh, thanks, Tom. No, I love that so much. It's so accurate too. And what I love about the support group as well is that we have so many members who are able to just kind of watch and kind of read posts without ever engaging. You don't have to engage or show up in person, and I think that that's a key part of our group, because you can kind of just join and read comments or read posts, and grow that confidence over time. We're all we all have a similar experience, right? And so we're all connected in that way, like you say. And so even though these are really complete strangers online, there is that similar connection and similar experience that you can see your own story in posts, and then receive encouragement in comments, even though it's not for you, it's for somebody else. And so anyways, I love all of that. And I love your story, and I love that you've stuck around and continued sharing, your passion with us for just making sure that, people are connected and are cared for. So thank you so much, Tom. I would love to transition to Tegan. Tegan, I would love to introduce, your story now, and really highlight how it helped you find your voice, kind of like how I just mentioned, we have a lot of survivors that kind of join the group and just watch and listen. And I know, from knowing your story a little bit, that's kind of how you started in our group. And so I also know that, you did leave your ex-partner in the middle of the pandemic, and that impacted the way that you were able to access support. So I would love to learn a little bit more of your story and how you found Speak Your Truth.
Yeah. So the pandemic was hard on everybody and isolating for everybody, but especially for people living with domestic violence. And so by the time I ended up leaving or ending the relationship, I was so burnt out and so lost and so confused about what was happening to me. It took a long time before I even realized that it was an abusive situation. And that's when I started just getting flooded with all these questions and feelings and emotions. And I just was seeking answers. And I ended up applying for something called Clare's Law. And through that, I was connected to a domestic violence specialist who met with me 4 times and connected me to supports. And I said, like I'm a mental health therapist myself, so I don't think I need the skills building stuff. I just need to be connected with other people. I need to be able to share my story and hear other people's stories and have that sense of community that Tom was talking about. And so she looked in my city, and there really wasn't anything. There was one group that was running, but it was more so just getting women back into the workforce after leaving their abusers or providing that education. And it wasn't what I needed. And so she suggested actually looking online, and because of the pandemic too, a lot of things did move virtually. So she said, there's a lot of virtual online, maybe a forum, and so I thought, okay, I've never considered anything like that before. And so I did a Google search, and your group came up on Facebook, and I thought, oh, this could be what I'm looking for. And it was everything that I needed and more, for sure.
I love hearing that. It's so great because so many people, found us originally through the viral post. So, hearing that people are finding us through, I love it, because we also, whenever someone applies to join our group, we screen everyone that comes through, and we ask them how they found us, and a lot of people are finding us through word of mouth. And more people now are finding us through Google searches. So, it's always great to hear that people are finding us that way, because that's actually how I kind of first started seeking support when I was in the middle of my relationship. I remember the very first time I had questioned if my ex was abusive. I went online and I Googled, "Is my husband abusive?" And I don't remember finding anything substantial that was helpful. And so it's so great that that our group is being found that way. But can you share with us a little bit more about how was the process after you joined, and how did it help you find your voice?
Yeah, so I definitely was a lurker for the first few months. It was more just reading other people's stories and having that realizing, like seeing other people share thoughts that I thought were only in my head, or experiences that I only ever experienced, and seeing so many other people find the words that I was really struggling with saying. My family and friends were really, really supportive of me and were there for me, but they just couldn't comprehend. And I had a really hard time sharing what it was that I was feeling, because it's just it's something that you really can't understand unless you experience it yourself. And so I just spent a lot of time reading other people's stories and crying and sitting with that. And then eventually I shared something, I think it was anonymous, a little tiny piece of my story for the first time. And the response that I got, I just felt so seen and heard and understood. And it was overwhelming, to be honest. And it just it gave me that courage. It kind of lit that fire. So, maybe a month later, something else happened and I shared that little piece and shared the next little piece. And soon I was able to piece together my story for the first time and find the words to be able to share it and get that courage too. It's so seeing everybody being so brave and talking so openly about their thoughts and these feelings that are confusing for everybody else around us who don't understand, but make sense to us, right? So that was pretty huge for me. And then once I shared, there was no stopping me. And Lisa, I think, was the one. She put a post one day and saying something about having the courage to speak up. And I said, what if I do? And I never stop. And she said, you go, girl. I said, okay.
I remember that. Yep.
I'm like, all right, you asked for it. And I haven't stopped since, and it's been wonderful.
And the problem is,
Exactly. There's no problem. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, it's like so fantastic because you are one of many in our support group, and so many other people have found their voices such similar ways to you, and it's just so encouraging to hear your story and hear how helpful it's been and how you were able to have that slower process into finding your voice. I think it's a gentle process that is allowed in Speak Your Truth. And so for all of you guys listening, just so that we are actually posting up the deeper interview into Tegan's story on our blog later today. So if you'd like to read Tegan's story, you can check out our socials. We'll be posting it later. So we have a Survivor Spotlight blog. And for any of you who want to share your stories through that forum, we encourage you to do so. We enjoy reading your guys' stories, and it's just so impactful. There's such commonalities in all of these stories, and there's always pieces of it that like really hit me. So thank you, Tegan, and for sharing your story. And thank you to all of our panelists. I'm so thankful to have met all of you guys. I don't think we would all be sitting in this same, sorry, my cat's coming through. I don't think we would be sitting in the same room. We're actually from all four time zones within the US. I think we're Pacific, Mountain, Central, and Eastern. So it's pretty cool, and two different countries represented. So anyways, I just think it's beautiful that our space has enabled us to find each other and gain connection and support and healing together.